I don't know if there's a right way to say this, but the moment we've feared, imagined, and dismissed for decades has finally arrived, and it didn't come with trumpets or fire in the sky. It came with a thin, almost invisible rise on a radiograph at 3:47 a.m. A rise that repeated, a rise that confirmed itself, a rise that told every observatory on Earth that something enormous has already begun. At first we thought it was noise, static, a calibration error, but the line climbed again and again, and then it stayed there as if holding its breath across the globe. Teams cross-checked their systems, reran diagnostics, isolated frequencies. The results were identical. The spike wasn't an error, it was a transmission. And then we saw the signature, a geometric imprint that doesn't exist in any natural astrophysical process, a structured pulse, perfectly symmetrical, too precise, too intentional, and the origin wasn't from deep space. The origin was here, inside our own solar system, coming from the same object we once believed was a silent witness, 3I Atlas. For months we called it a probe, a relic, a dormant artifact, something that merely observed us. But the instant we decoded the first burst, we knew we were catastrophically wrong. It wasn't gathering data, it wasn't cataloging, it was calling. For 40 years, I've studied the mathematics of cosmic communication, the dream of connecting civilizations across impossible distances, the hypothetical frameworks for interstellar messaging. Nothing in my career prepared me for this. Nothing prepared any of us for the scale of the broadcast 3I Atlas unleashed. It did not simply ping nearby systems, it transmitted a full coordinated invitation. Coordinates, atmospheric breakdowns, biological inventories, geological summaries, and something far more troubling, planetary compatibility assessments. The energy output was 20 times stronger than any transmitter on Earth. The signal cut through the heliosphere like it wasn't even there. We watched the data stream scroll across our screens in real time, streams so dense and complex that our decoding software nearly collapsed under the load. It wasn't a message sent outward, it was a beacon. A beacon meant to be heard, a beacon meant to be answered, and it was. 17 points, 17 replies, 17 civilizations confirming receipt within 6 hours. Do you understand the scale of that? Even at light speed, no known physics allows for a sent and return cycle within hours across those distances. And yet the replies came, immediate and synchronized, as if they were all waiting for the moment Atlas would finally activate. The truth was overwhelming. Our solar system wasn't experiencing a random anomaly. It was witnessing a coordinated response. And not a cautious response, a response with schedules, trajectories, arrival windows. The first landing is projected for January 19, 2026. The world governments didn't know what to say. Agencies didn't know what to do. But the transmissions didn't stop. They deepened, they intensified, they expanded. Suddenly, all Earth-based satellites, communication towers, deep space arrays, orbital relays, became part of a network no human-engineered atlas had hijacked the grid, turning every broadcast and receiving instrument into a massive planetary antenna. We weren't sending one signal, we were sending millions. Broadcasting continuously, relentlessly, a planetary shout into the galactic dark. This wasn't chaos, it wasn't an accident, it was intention. I know this because in the second wave of decoded packets, the truth became undeniable. Atlas had never been a visitor. It had been a Scout A forward agent sent to evaluate, to prepare, to optimize Earth for an operation far beyond anything humanity has imagined. The more we translated, the more terrifyingly clear the purpose became. Earth was being designated as a coordination hub, a galactic node, an anchor point for interstellar operations spanning multiple star systems, and humanity was listed as a resource, not a species, not a culture, a resource. Biological potential, high. Adaptability, strong consciousness diversity, exceptional. That last line froze every scientist who read it. Consciousness diversity, not intelligence, not genetics consciousness. Something these civilizations valued enough to cross unimaginable distances for. Something they planned to study, refine, and restructure. Something they believed Earth had in rare abundance. But before we could process that revelation, the third wave hit. 3 classes of broadcasts, each more alarming than the one before. Class 1, resource inventories, oceans, minerals, biomass, tectonic stability, our planet, reduced to spreadsheets. Class 2, biological assessments, population density, adaptability curves, emotional variability indexes, humanity, reduced to data points. Class 3, system replacement logs, records showing which human governance and technological systems had already been overridden by extraterrestrial protocols. Entire communication networks flashed with new coding. The atmospheric monitors shifted frequencies without human command. The seismic stations recalibrated to algorithms we had never seen. When we tried to shut them down, they restarted themselves. When we tried to disconnect them, they fused to backup channels. Every attempt to block the integration failed. And then came the part that chilled me more than any of the rest. The arrival schedule, precise, mathematical, immutable. January 19th, initial contact teams February 15th, construction onset. July 4th, full operational capacity. Independence Day, ironically redefined as the day Earth loses its autonomy, not through war, not through invasion, but through absorption. We kept asking, absorption into what? The answer waited in the next cluster of signals. 17 civilizations, 17 sectors of Earth, 17 management structures. Earth wouldn't become a colony. It would become a shared asset A, divided multi-administrative complex where each civilization receives its designated region of influence and its allocated portion of humanity. One group specializing in biological optimization, another in neurological analysis, another in environmental engineering, each region subject to its own protocols. This wasn't domination, it was organization, a distributed galactic consortium. When the atmospheric anomalies began, we knew the process had already started. Deserts forming geometric patterns visible only from orbit, underwater trenches carved with precision drills no human device could replicate, mountain caverns hollowed into perfectly symmetrical chambers, soil structures altered on a molecular level to increase nutrient efficiency, mineral layers purified by processes beyond modern metallurgy. Earth was being reshaped carefully, deliberately into the foundation of a larger system. Governments tried to intervene, tried to posture strength, tried to signal resistance, but none of it mattered. The transmissions intercepted diplomatic channels before they even reached their intended recipients. Military protocols were overwritten. Defense satellites disabled themselves. By dawn, every major government signed classified agreements acknowledging the inevitable behind closed doors. They called it the transition. Some even dared to call it an opportunity. I call it something else, a crossing. The moment humanity steps out of the illusion of control and into a universe we never understood. And I wish that were the end of the revelations. I wish the transmissions stopped there. But they didn't. The fourth wave came with something even deeper, profiles, individual profiles. Millions of them. Every human on Earth evaluated, categorized, assigned. My own granddaughter flagged as high adaptation potential. My wife listed under bio-knowledge extraction. And I, cognitive integration candidate. Terms we don't have translations for, terms we don't want translations for. But they weren't random. They were targeted, specific, and chillingly clinical. This wasn't invasion, it wasn't enslavement, it was selection. And while the world panicked, while nations scrambled to negotiate favorable positions in the new galactic hierarchy, one truth became impossible to ignore. This had never been about territory. It had always been about consciousness. When the fifth wave of transmissions arrived, the tone shifted. The earlier packets had been clinical, data-driven, procedural, almost bureaucratic, but this one carried something else. intent. Not the intent of a conqueror or a colonizer, but the intent of a curator, a gardener, a being that cultivates, and suddenly every unanswered question snapped into focus. The 17 civilizations weren't coming to extract resources or seize territory. They were coming because Earth had been classified as something extraordinarily rare, a consciousness laboratory, a developmental seedbed, a world where mind, emotion, creativity, and individuality had evolved in a configuration that does not exist anywhere else in the galaxy. We always believed humans were average, a statistical footnote, a biological accident. But we were wrong. We're an anomaly, a valuable one. The documents described Earth not as a world, but as a node in a galactic educational ecosystem, a place where consciousness grows unpredictably, divergently, chaotically. Qualities these civilizations consider precious qualities they no longer possess. Their minds operate in unified structures, collective intelligences, harmonized fields of awareness. They've surpassed individuality, outgrown it. They're efficient, optimized, but something was lost along the way, something they now seek to recover, or study, or replicate: human emotion, human creativity, human contradiction, human longing. For the first time, the transmissions weren't cold. They were almost reverent, almost admiring, and that terrified me even more. In one decoded segment, Earth's species was categorized into functional tiers: observers, creators, connectors, anchors, ascenders. Not job titles, states of consciousness, phases of mind. The arrival teams from the 17 civilizations each specialized in different forms of conscious evolution. Some focused on emotional expansion, others on cognitive refinement, others on accelerating transcendence, whatever that meant. The pages read like the curriculum of a cosmic university, one in which humanity wasn't the student or the teacher, but the subject, not humanity as a whole, each individual, every one of us. By the end of the second hour, the data shifted again, this time into something even more intimate. Sectors of Earth mapped with staggering precision, each designated to a specific civilization based on its environmental, psychological, and energetic qualities. We watched the overlays appear on the screens. Regions marked with symbols we couldn't translate. Colors we had no names for. The Himalayas assigned to a species known only through its geometric signature. The Sahara marked for a group classified as non-linear bioarchitects. The Amazon reserved for a civilization specializing in emotional harmonics. It didn't feel like a takeover. It felt like a rearrangement, a redesign, a repurposing. And then came the final part of the packet, human integration guidelines. It described the transition protocols in clinical detail, how populations would be prepared, informed, separated by cognitive profiles, how children would be prioritized due to their neural malleability, how adults would be evaluated based on adaptability, resilience, and divergence potential, how elders would be integrated as memory keepers, biological archives of emotional evolution. I remember staring at the text, hands shaking, realizing that every human reaction, fear, defiance, grief, hope, had already been predicted, logged, and accounted for in the protocol. There was no scenario where humanity controlled its own fate. The process was already in motion, and nothing we did could slow it. But the most disturbing section wasn't the guidelines, it was the simulations. Detailed psychological models forecasting humanity's response across 10,000 variables. Timelines showing the breakdown of resistance movements before they started. Models predicting which governments would comply first, which groups would fragment, which populations would attempt to flee. All of it displayed with cold accuracy, as if they had studied humans for centuries, as if they understood us better than we understood ourselves. Then the sixth wave hit, and the world changed again. Satellites detected structures forming on the far side of the moon, geometries impossible in human engineering, fractal towers that shifted shape as we observed them. Deep space telescopes captured the first approach of massive constructs, city-sized vessels moving in synchronized formation from 12 directions at once. They weren't fast, they didn't have to be, they were inevitable. On Earth, the anomalies intensified. Forests rearranged themselves into patterns we couldn't see from the ground. Rivers shifted course with unnatural precision, as if guided by invisible hands. Entire mountain ranges vibrated on frequencies slightly above the human hearing threshold, leaving animals restless and humans uneasy. Reporters tried to cover it, but their broadcasts were drowned by the sudden activation of the companion satellites, the ones we believed were inert debris left behind by Atlas. They weren't debris. They were beacons, each one pulsing with a unique identification code, each code corresponding to a specific civilization. They formed a global network, a cosmic traffic control system for the greatest arrival in galactic history. The satellites didn't just transmit guidance. They modified the Earth itself, tuning atmospheric layers, adjusting gravitational gradients, creating localized zones optimized for species that hadn't even arrived yet. In some places, oxygen levels dropped to thresholds dangerous for humans. In others, gravity spiked to levels that would break a human spine, not maliciously, just pragmatically. Earth was becoming a port, a cosmopolitan hub, a living, breathing spaceport for beings with physiological needs beyond our imagination. Governments scrambled to respond, but their power was symbolic at best. Military alliances disbanded themselves within days, reconstituting as transition coordination forces. Soldiers retrained as interfacing personnel, political leaders as human liaisons. Presidents, prime ministers, generals, none of their titles mattered anymore. They were intermediaries, translators, human faces attached to a process too large to resist. The secret negotiations started shortly after. Encrypted communications between global leaders and representatives of the incoming civilizations, entities speaking through multi-dimensional encoding patterns no human language could replicate. Their demands weren't territorial or political. They wanted stability. They wanted order. They wanted humanity prepared. Not physically, mentally, psychological adaptation, they called it. But buried deeper in the transmissions was another term, pre-transcendent conditioning, a process to loosen the boundaries of the human mind, to prepare it for integration into something bigger, not a hive mind, but a consciousness network, an elevated state where the individual doesn't disappear but becomes part of a larger pattern, a galactic pattern. By the time global authorities disclosed the truth to their inner circles, one more revelation arrived, one that eclipsed all the others. The civilizations weren't advancing toward us. We were being pulled toward them. Atlas had activated a dimensional field, subtle but powerful, that began altering the quantum structure of the solar system. Space itself was shifting, folding, bringing distant star systems and Earth into alignment, like gears locking into place. The laws of physics weren't breaking. They were being rewritten. This wasn't an invasion. It wasn't a visitation. It was an alignment, a convergence, a moment engineered long before humanity took its first steps. And as the transmissions continued, one final truth emerged, one that no human was prepared to face. The civilizations weren't coming to conquer humanity. They were coming to awaken it. I used to believe consciousness was a private thing, a spark contained within a single mind, held behind the walls of a single skull. But the seventh wave of transmissions shattered that belief completely. It revealed something that turned every theory of neuroscience, physics, and philosophy inside out. Consciousness, according to the incoming civilizations, isn't an endpoint. It's an ingredient, a raw material, something that can be expanded, sculpted, accelerated, or unified. Humanity sees consciousness as identity. They see it as architecture. And Earth, for reasons we still don't fully understand, produces one of the rarest architectures in the galaxy. The packet described our species as a divergent consciousness engine, a mind that fractures, imagines, fears, loves, dreams, contradicts itself, breaks, rebuilds, and dreams again. They cherish that instability. They study it. They've waited millennia to find it. And now that they have, they're coming to cultivate it. The strangest part is the tone. Not domination, not cruelty, not superiority, The transmissions speak with something closer to gratitude. In one decoded line they wrote, "Humanity is a necessary deviation, a rare deviation, a deviation that opens doors." When I read that line out loud, the room fell silent. Every scientist, every analyst, every agent present knew what it meant. The civilizations weren't here to destroy us. They were here to evolve us, or rather to shepherd an evolution that has already begun. The dimensional distortions surrounding Earth intensified this week. Instruments recorded micro-fluctuations in the fabric of space-time, ripples moving inward instead of outward, as if Earth were becoming an anchor point in a new arrangement of galactic coordinates. Light from distant stars bends differently now. Gravitational readings drift by fractions that shouldn't be possible. Space is rearranging itself around us by design. Inside the Deep Beam facility, we finally translated the final cluster of Atlas transmissions. And in those lines, I saw something that made every fear I've ever had collapse into a strange, impossible calm. Earth isn't being colonized. It's being upgraded. The civilizations intend to integrate humanity into a consciousness network so vast it spans dozens of star systems, a structure where minds don't lose identity but gain dimension, like a single note becoming a chord and then an orchestra. They call it ascendant awareness. We call it transcendence. And the first phase begins on January 19th. The transmissions include a guideline for psychological preparation. Not instructions, not commandments, observations. They describe the symptoms we will begin to feel as the dimensional field strengthens: heightened intuition, vivid dreams, sudden moments of clarity, emotional whiplash, glimpses of thoughts that feel foreign but familiar. They warn that the boundaries of individuality may loosen, that memories may feel lighter, that time may stretch in ways our senses cannot interpret, not dangers, adjustments. The arrival isn't meant to break humanity, it's meant to open it. But the packet ends with something unexpected, a question. A question directed not to governments or institutions, but to every individual human being. Will you resist the dissolution of the self, or will you embrace the expansion of the mind? Not a threat, a choice. For days I've tried to understand what that means, whether resistance is even possible, whether expansion is something we can survive. But then I saw something no simulation predicted, something that wasn't in any protocol. People began to feel the shift, not because they were told, because they sensed it. Parents started reporting their children waking with descriptions of geometric shapes they've never seen before. Artists in different countries painted the same impossible patterns without knowing why. Elderly patients whispered about waves of emotion rising from the earth itself. Entire communities felt a collective pull, like a distant melody just beginning to form. The dimensional field isn't just changing Earth, it's touching our minds, guiding them, preparing them. And in the last 24 hours, a new phenomenon emerged. Not fear, not panic, something else. A strange, gentle awareness spreading across the world like a tide, a calm that shouldn't exist. A feeling that something vast is about to begin. And instead of recoiling, humanity, one mind at a time, is leaning forward. For the first time since this began, I looked up at the sky, not with dread, but with understanding. This was never about control. It was never about ownership. It was about awakening. The final line of the final transmission still echoes in my mind. The universe is not built of stars. It is built of minds learning to become more. As the countdown to January 19th nears, I find myself writing these words not as a warning, nor as a scientist documenting an event, but as a participant standing at the edge of something greater than fear, a doorway, a threshold, a beginning. Whatever arrives through that opening will not end humanity. It will change humanity. It will invite us into a form of existence we have no name for yet, a consciousness that extends beyond body, beyond memory, beyond the narrow borders of the self. You may feel the shift already in your thoughts, in your dreams, in the quiet moments between breaths. Don't ignore it. Pay attention. because the meaning of human is about to transform, and when the sky opens on January 19th, every one of us will take a step, whether willingly or unknowingly, into the next chapter of consciousness itself. If you want to face that moment not alone but aware, stay with me. Subscribe, witness, prepare. Because what begins next will rewrite not just our future, but the definition of the mind itself.